The Spinoff Podcast Network.
K-pop to me means more than just listening to music. It's learning to be myself.
The Spinoff's new documentary, K-Pollies, follows 3 Pacific youth obsessed with K-pop. In a one-off documentary, see what they've found in Korean pop culture and how they bridge it with their own.
When you start dressing, looking different, everyone side-eyes you. But in K-pop, they're just like, no, like celebrate yourself.
Watch K-Pollies today at thespinoff.co.nz/videos. Made with the support of New Zealand On Air. You're listening to Business is Boring, a podcast that reckons it's anything but. Business is Boring is brought to you by SparkLab, offering inspiration and practical advice to help businesses find their edge. To hear more about SparkLab, including details about the latest events, workshops, and business tools, visit sparklab.co.nz. And now, here's your host, Simon Pound.
You're listening to Business is Boring, a podcast that reckons it's anything but. Business is Boring is made by the Spinoff with help from Callaghan Innovation, New Zealand's innovation agency. Here's your host, Simon Pound.
Late last year, news emerged that a New Zealand gin had won the highest accolade in the global industry, Best London Dry Gin, at the top international wine and spirits competition. It was a great win to get after a big run and a lot of change. This gin had recently changed its name from Rogue Society to Scapegrace, a huge undertaking and big risk in the name of the bigger game of making it overseas. And making it they are, beating more than 600 other gins to take out that supreme award, which had a 50% increase in entrants from the year before. Part of the huge wave of growth in gin that the guys behind this company timed very well when they started in just 2014. How do you go from a standing start in 4 years to the top? How do you become the top-selling super premium gin in New Zealand in even shorter time? And how do you add around 40 countries and heaps of states in the US while changing name? Well, to talk the journey, 2 of the co-founders, Daniel Mclaughlin and Mark Neal, join me now. G'day, thanks for being here today.
Thanks, Simon. Thanks for having us.
Yeah, g'day, Simon.
So we've got Daniel here.
Hey, Simon.
And Mark there.
Kia ora, Simon.
Kia ora. And I'll ask, how did you come to start the gin company, 2 of the 3 co-founders?
Well, we basically, in short, Mark's actually my brother-in-law. So we started about 7 years ago, really. We used to get together a lot and drink a lot of gin from all around the world, and we sort of came to a realization that you'd walk into the local liquor store and there'd be a lot of gins from the likes of the UK and Europe and the US, but there wasn't really anything that represented New Zealand, and we thought that New Zealand being such a clean, pure sort of environment, that potentially there was an opportunity to sort of explore a premium New Zealand gin. So we also realised that the category was quite stuffy and quite English and very traditional, and being sort of early 30s gin adorers, there wasn't really anything that spoke to who we were as gin drinkers. So we started I guess on the journey of how do you make gin, who makes the best gin, looking at what's on the market at the moment and talking to distillers and bartenders and really just delving into the whole process and then doing a lot of work on brand and positioning and market and we basically spent about two to 3 years working on the project, and then we launched as you say sort of February 2014, and we've sort of just been pretty much running ever since.
How do you actually go about making a gin? Like, is it something that do you get a bathtub at home, or what kind of a process do you go through?
Excuse me. Essentially there's 4 principles to making exceptional gin. And when we were developing the recipe, we really took each one of those principles into consideration. Get one of those wrong and your quality drops. So you start off with a base spirit. That can be various forms. You've got to distill it in something. You've got stainless stills. You've got copper stills. You've got your botanical mix. And then also finally you've got your water. With Scapegrace, we have a wheat-based grain, which is a high ethanol. It's one of the most cleanest grains we can get our hands on in the world. And then we put our 12 to 13 botanicals in there, depending on what variant it is. They macerate the botanicals in the Nutri-Grain spirit, which gets all the oils and the flavours out. And then we distill in a copper pot still, which is a John Doerr 19th century still. It's about 120 odd years old, which got brought to New Zealand in the 70s. It's actually an old whiskey still, which is pretty unique. And then that comes off the still around about 86% ABV. So she's pretty high at that stage. And the final element is the water, which brings it down to drinking standard, which is for us 42.2. And that water is absolutely critical, and one thing I think we take for granted here in New Zealand.
Is how good the water is here to work with?
Yeah, absolutely. A lot of the gins from around the world, in the UK, you've got the Thames right next to you, and our distillery is sort of at the base of the Southern Alps and the Canterbury region there, in Kaipoi, and some of the waters there are some of the best waters in the world, for sure.
How do you start the process, though? So that's kind of, by the time you've committed to buying a 120-year-old still and found all the best grain and stuff, as a couple of mates sitting around thinking, shoot, we should make something like this. How do you first start making your own batch?
You basically need to come up with a recipe, and that recipe is effectively a combination of botanicals. Botanicals are pretty much like dried plants and herbs and roots and things like that. And every gin has a different blend of botanicals. So you need, of course, to fine-tune what that blend looks like and figure out what the motivations are, I guess, behind the spirit that you're trying to create. For us, it was about creating a real versatile gin that was really good for making classic cocktails with bartenders in mind. So we really wanted to create a really top-quality premium gin that was perfect for classic cocktails and anything from a gin and tonic through to a martini. And so we decided that the important component of that was citrus. So we really beefed up the citrus notes in our recipe. So we have 12 botanicals, and the 2 dominant botanicals are dried orange and dried lemon. It gives it a really citrus forward profile, which makes it really good for cocktails and for versatility across a range of different premium cocktails and classic cocktails.
What was the thing 2.5 years into this kind of journey of gin discovery that made you think, right, we've got it. Let's launch the company. Let's chuck our lot in. Let's do this thing.
Well, I guess it was realizing that you actually had something good, from a liquid perspective, and we basically to test that we put it in front of a lot of bartenders, a lot of experts in the industry, distributors as well, and we realised that the spirit was really good, and then we did a lot of work on the whole brand positioning and where we really wanted the brand to be positioned, and found a really nice sweet spot, and then and a combination of then working on sort of brand and packaging design, all that sort of stuff as well. So we were really happy with the product that we had, and people were saying the same thing, and it wasn't just your friends and family, which is I guess generally your friends and family always say that things are great, but when you're actually putting it in front of an audience of experts and they say it's good too, then you give it a crack.
We'll get to that branding in a minute when we talk about the story change, because it's beautiful. The bottle's beautiful and the name and stuff. It was a really lovely product that you made there. What backgrounds did you guys have to be able to do all of these things?
Well, my background is I had a small business before this, which was a sort of a liquor promotions type agency. So I used to work with the big liquor brands in New Zealand and Australia, the likes of Diageo and Pernod Ricard and Bacardi, and I used to do a lot of everything from point of sale design through to merchandise and trade marketing concepts. Anything sort of with a brand on it, really, in either a retail environment or in a bar environment. So I started that when I was in my early 20s and ran that for for a decade before starting this. And so I guess I'd always worked in the liquor industry since I was 20 years old. So that was kind of what I knew.
How about you, Mark? What was your path into the liquor industry?
Yeah, well, it's kind of been in the family blood from my granddad, really. When I was growing up, my parents ran hotels, good old country pubs, and we lived on site, so a lot of Coke and raspberry on tap. So yeah, it's always been in the blood. And then sort of once I went to university down in Otago, did a little bit at the Spates Brewery, and sort of did my degree, which was in sort of sales and marketing, and phys ed for some weird reason. And then came up to Auckland and sort of spent sort of 7 to 8 years working for Lion in sort of various roles across sort of sales and marketing. So yeah, it's always been in the blood. Yeah.
And knowing the industry like that and seeing that gap, because, as was mentioned in the intro about the hundreds of gins now in this kind of category, and how a few years ago when you first spotted, this lack of a gin with this kind of character, in the time since then, the flowering of gin has been absolutely amazing. I saw a video recently of a friend who was judging a gin competition in Sydney, and there were about 300 independent gins just from Australia in this competition. Extraordinary.
Yeah. Even if you look at domestically, there's since we started 5 years ago, there's been dozens and dozens of small sort of micro distilleries sort of popping into the scene, and that's right throughout the world. It's very similar to that because you're getting all these sort of more province-based kind of distilleries popping up. Yeah.
And the volume of gin being sold has tripled in the UK in the last 5 years or so.
Yeah, the category's in really, really good growth still. The gin resurgence, I guess, started over a decade ago in the UK, and it's still seeing sort of good solid growth each year on year. So, and that's spread through through all the Europe and down to New Zealand and Australia in the last kind of few years.
So that's quite a big kind of wave to ride. But still, the success that you guys have seen from coming from a standing start, how long did it take before you were the top-selling super premium gin in New Zealand?
It was a number of years, really, wasn't it? Before we sort of, before we really cracked that, I guess. So it was, we started off, from day one, and it was just Mark and myself sort of slinging cases out of a small office in Grey Lynn. It was just the two of us. Mark would, look after the sales. I'd look after the commercial side of things, and we were basically just shoving cases out the office door to we built around about 100 odd bars as customers and maybe 30-40 retailers, and then after about 6 months we got our first distributor online, which was Hancock's Wine, Beer and Spirits Merchants, and they basically took us from a small distribution base to a really large distribution base throughout the country. And so we ranged in a lot of the best bars, restaurants, hotels, and pretty much most liquor stores. So that, and then that allowed us to, I guess, take a step back and work on the brand and the further improve the product and and our international expansion.
How do you go about growing internationally? It's so cool, to have won the top London dry gin from Aotearoa, it's quite remarkable. How do you go about taking Cold Newcastle gin back to the UK?
Well, we started, after we got our first distributor in New Zealand over the line, we then started looking at export markets, and being a New Zealand company, the obvious place to go to next is Australia. So we've been in Australia for around about 3 years. We appointed our distributor there straight off the bat. We didn't do a direct model there. And we sort of core ranged in Dan Murphy's over there, and sort of maybe sort of 200-300 odd bars in Australia, and then we just went from there really. And sort of the next market off the back of that was the UK, and then off the UK came sort of 20 odd markets throughout Europe, and then into Asia and the US and Canada, and so we're sort of you're just sort of basically building it, one market at a time. But the key thing is appointing a really solid distributor in each market, and that's because we're a distributor model, so we run sort of 35, 40 odd distributors throughout the world, and so it's it's quite hard work getting a distributor over the line and getting the right distributor that you want. So it can take a number of months, even over a year to get that sorted. So that's kind of, I guess, determines the strategy a little bit.
And up until this point in the story, a lot of the success maybe was the fact that the bottle looked cool, and it was called Rogue Society, and that conjured up kind of these images of, kind of rascals and rogues and troublemakers and gin and kind of the ancient times. How scary was it then to work out when you got to Europe that you'd have to change the name? And what happened there?
It wasn't a particularly fun time. We'd sold in Rogue Society to the UK, to our distributor High Spirits there, and they'd agreed to take the brand on, and we were at this point working through kind of contracts and all that sort of thing. And at the same time, we went to register a European trademark for Rogue Society, which is Europe. The European Community trademark covers the UK and all of Europe. And it was at that point that we got the big letter from the Rogue Brewing guys in the US, and they basically challenged our IP for Rogue Society because they owned the word Rogue. And we spent 6 months probably trying to work an arrangement with these guys, to be able to use Rogue Society, because they're an American brewery that had deviated into spirits, and we were a spirits company, and we had Rogue Society. They were Rogue, so we thought that was different enough. But there was no really negotiation with them at all. They in the end, after a number of comms backwards and forwards, they basically just told us to, deal with it or move on. Or pretty much deal with their lawyers. So at that point, we really needed to come up with a new name. That was the only. We sort of tried all different combinations, and the only option was really to come up with a new name.
And that's not a light decision to take. What kind of process do you have to go through to change the name from there?
Well, it was pretty much. It's like renaming your firstborn son. My son's name's Ryder. It's like coming up for a new name for Ryder, which is quite tough, So Mark and myself, this was our baby, this was our firstborn son actually, because we had this before we had either of our children, and so it was pretty tough time, to come up with a name, because you needed to come up with a name that was better than Rogue Society, but still spoke to kind of the core DNA of what we were about and what the brand was about and what people would buy in the product for. So it was pretty challenging, and we spent months and months and months talking with different creatives, different agencies. We gave all these different options a go, and we ended up coming up with a list of names that sort of we thought would be a potential, and we basically spoke to the people that were drinking our product and put it in front of them and actually got their feedback as to which name that they thought was appropriate, and it was actually Scapegrace was one that I came up with myself, and we really liked it because it still really spoke to the core DNA of Rogue.
How did you find that? Like an 18th century word that meant the same thing? Are you reading some kind of Dickens or?
No. It's basically every night you'd leave the office, you'd go home, you'd have dinner, put the kids to bed, and you'd spend about 3 hours on Google, and you'd go in a crazy direction of you'd start with one word and you'd just basically thesauruses and dictionaries and all this kind of thing. You'd end up in another place by the end of the night, and you'd come up with a list of words or names in between. So, and Scapegrace was one that I just found one night and loved it straight away. To be honest, I thought it was a really cool word, and a little bit. I actually. To be honest, I like it more than Rogue Society now, because I think it's a little bit more mysterious. It's not as obvious, and it's sort of it's got a really cool meaning, cool background, and it sort of fits really well with the brand name.
Yeah, and a thing like that where once you know it, you're part of the club that knows it. It's kind of an entry, kind of secret password or something, which is kind of cool, a story that people can tell.
Totally, yeah.
I guess having such a distinctive bottle must have really helped, because you'd know that people would still recognise you on the shelf even with a different name there. Tell me about landing on that bottle, as that's such a huge part of the connecting to customers part, isn't it?
Yeah, no, it is. When we were sort of in the development stage, trying to figure out a bottle, Dan was actually overseas with my sister on I think it was your honeymoon, wasn't it?
It actually was my honeymoon.
Honeymoon, yeah. And we were looking at inspirations for bottles, and then Dan found one of the old Geneva bottles, which is the old sort of 19th century gin bottles. It's what you used to rock up to your parties and your gin crates and back in the day. And he brought it back home, and that was sort of our inspiration. We wanted to make a modern interpretation of the classic. And the bottle was a real challenge. It's kind of what stalled us at least a year to get to market, because actually creating that bottle was so important. It was all about kind of, you could go get a stock bottle off the shelf and slap a name on it, but we wanted to create an amazing looking bottle. So we spent a lot of time to get that perfect. And then once we went through numbers and numbers of bottle designers. And then once we cracked it, we knew we had something. And I always remember I think it was the first year that we were in market. We got in San Francisco, which is a big comp. We picked up the best looking gin bottle in the world with the new Tanqueray design. And we were only 6 months old at that stage, and that's when I knew we had something special in terms of a good looking bottle.
And with that kind of that kind of parachute, I guess it would still maybe help you a bit, but it must have been such a concern to then change the name in the market. Did you see a speed bump? Was there a wobble, or what happened out of the back of that?
To be honest, we grew volume considerably, which was always our intention. Let's try and grow volume from the situation. And I felt that if the story was 100% honest and it was genuine, and we needed to tell our supporters and our followers the truth. It couldn't be fabricated. So I thought if we told the story how it landed, and then we actually ran it through a really strong campaign, would be putting our best foot forward. So, we've grown volume considerably, and I think it's because the end of the day, people are drinking gin for the gin. It's the same drop. It's just the different name. So I think people that were drinking Rogue Society are still drinking Scapegrace, but the power of a really strong campaign when you can actually, you've got a strong message, which is, authentic, works.
You get served lemons, so make gin and tonics.
Exactly. Yeah.
Life gives you lemons.
That's it.
And so, where are you now? Because last year, the PR that came out around the winning that big competition was saying that distribution was ramping up in the States. You're in the top kind of 5 in the UK. Like, lay out for me where the business is today.
So we're pretty much in New Zealand. We've sort of been trading here for 5 years, and number one selling super premium gin in New Zealand, which is bloody awesome. And then in the UK, which is probably it's our third biggest export market now, is we're doing really really well in the UK. And the UK is a competitive market. You've got every brand in the world there pretty much, and we're in that sort of top 5 imported super premium brands over there, which is really good. And then in the US, we launched there in sort of September last year, and we've been pushed out to sort of 22 states through our company over there, our distributor over there, Sazerac Co. And the US is going really, really good. That's now overtaken all our other markets, and it's our second biggest export market. We're about to ship our 5th container to the US, so it's going really, really well over there. We're really happy with how the brand's been well received. So the company now, I guess, we've sort of almost doubled in size in the last 12 months from a top line perspective. Where the business is tracking really well. We've also taken this opportunity this year to take a step back and look at our key people in the company, because it's all about the people that you have as part of your team, and we really want to make sure that that we had a really strong team behind us to take us through that next stage of growth. So we've really bolstered up our management team and our resource. So we've got pretty much experts in each department now, which is really good, because we were running it bloody lean before and trying to do a lot of things not probably as well as we could have. We were probably a little bit last minute. So this year we've doubled the company size in terms of heads, and we've got a full finance department, office department, all that sort of thing. So
that must be really nice after having had to do it all.
Yeah, pretty much. It was sort of before it was every role was split between me and Mark. So now it's actually quite nice to have some good solid people in behind us.
And where are you going? What's next?
Well, the motivation, I guess, from day one was to build a global super premium spirits company. So we feel that we've done a really good job in the last 4 or 5 years in building Scapegrace into a global brand. There's still a lot to be done, obviously, but we've got a really good route to market now. The brand's been well received in our in the markets we're trading in, and it's going really well. So we're quite keen to move into other categories, and so we've been working for a number of years on a New Zealand single malt whiskey, which is what we're sort of looking to roll out, I guess, in the next sort of 12 months or so. So that'll be pretty exciting and a whole new journey. And basically, New Zealand single malt whiskey, New Zealand super premium gin, they go so well together, and pretty much every single one of our distributors around the world is screaming out for a single malt whiskey from New Zealand, and we'll take the brand overnight. So that's a big focus for us at the moment, and also just building building that portfolio within gin, looking at some potential line extensions for Scapegrace, some new products that will be coming out towards the end of the year, which will be bloody exciting too.
It sounds pretty like things have, gone pretty well in quite a short time. Like 5 years is, I'm sure it's like kids, isn't it? The days feel long and the years feel short.
Yeah.
But that's a short time. Like, did you expect to be here? Like, was this the plan? Do you kind of pinch yourself, or are you not as far as you thought you should be by now?
I think you keep pushing out the those key you get there and you're like, well, that was great. Okay, what's next? So I think we're pretty happy with what we've achieved in 5 years, and we've got pretty big motivations of what we're going to achieve in the next 5 years, and we're sort of, I guess now we're trying to look at a longer term vision as well. Sort of trying to what does the next 10 years look like, for example. So it's sort of looking out further afield and sort of having a really good strategy in place. We've got a really really strong board in place at the moment, which is great. To be able to bounce those visions and those strategies off, so we're really happy with how it's going. But it's, as you say, it's gone really really fast.
What advice do you guys, you must be asked for advice all the time. What advice do you give to a bunch of people who maybe have a dream and are talking with mates and thinking about kicking something off?
What sort of advice? I guess surround yourself with bloody good people is it's all about your team, really. From the person that you go into business with. I couldn't have asked for a better business partner, and likewise with the third co-founder, Richard Burke. He's also really really supportive and helpful. And then we've got a really good board in place, as I mentioned. With a good chairman, Peter Keane, who's the ex-managing director of Lion Nathan. So he brings some good governance, and then right down through the business. The people that we're brought in and that we're forming into this family. The Rogue Society Distilling Co. family is really really strong. So it's people are everything, I think.
I love the way you mention family and your own families there, and you are family too. Like, how do you define success? Like, what success look like for you guys?
Well, I guess success is a number of things. It's obviously from a business perspective, and continuing to build the global super premium spirits company that we set out to. And for us, we really feel that there's a big opportunity here to grow a very large, substantial company. We feel that New Zealand's a great breeding ground for that, and the route to market and the partners we've got in place means that there's not really a foreseeable ceiling for the business. So it's about growing this thing, and we're really excited about that, and we don't really see too many obstacles, and that side of things. So that's one thing, and then there's also the fact that we love what we do. It's a really awesome industry that we're in, and we love you get out of bed in the morning with a spring in your step, and that's pretty important too. So from a success perspective, I think that's two things, to continuing to grow this business and actually enjoying what you do.
That's awesome.
You got anything to add?
That was really top.
Yeah, beautiful. Well, thank you for joining us today. That's Daniel and Mark from Scapegrace Gin, and keep an eye out in the near future for a New Zealand single malt whiskey, it sounds like. Thanks for joining us today, guys.
Cheers.
Cool. Thanks, Simon. Much appreciated.
Thank you so much for producing Ms. Tina Tiller, and thank you very much for listening.
You've been listening to Business is Boring, presented by Simon Pound, and brought to you by the Spinoff and Callaghan Innovation.
From the Spinoff Podcast Network, that was Business is Boring, brought to you by SparkLab. Make sure you're following Business is Boring wherever you get your podcasts. And for more information on SparkLab, visit sparklab.co.nz. Ready to rediscover the joys of cycling? With over 300 kilometres of cycle paths across Tāmaki Makaurau, jumping on your bike and going for a ride is such a fun way to discover the city from a different perspective. Cycling is getting more and more popular across Auckland, so now's a great time to join the hype and give cycling a go. Head to at.govt/cycling to find your nearest cycleway today. The Spinoff Podcast Network.